Hello everyone, it's time for introduction to the New Testament. And today is the 17th lecture and the third lecture of the teachings of Jesus. And today I will lecture to you about the prodigal son. And so everyone, in the previous lecture and the second teachings of Jesus Christ, we talked about the man who fell among thieves, and we had discussed this together. But today, this third teaching, through the story about the prodigal son, we're going to share the words today. These words about the prodigal son in Luke chapter 15, the lesson that Jesus is trying to give us. If we take all of the New Testament as a whole, so if you take the New and the Old Testaments all together, so the heart that God has regarding us humans, so if God is illustrating that heart, so if we were to receive that heart, it would be what we will talk about today here in lecture 17, in the story of the prodigal son. And we could talk about this. So it's a short teaching among the words of Jesus Christ, but the meaning that is revealed here to us, there are so many different meanings of this story. So regarding the introduction to the New Testament, we have already come to the 17th lecture. Until now, and so within the life of Jesus, the things that have been revealed, whether it's the works of Jesus, the parables of Jesus, and through the teachings of Jesus, and through the people who met Jesus, and for the people who have received the grace of Jesus, and so the people who went against Jesus, and the religious leaders who went against Jesus at that time, the Pharisees, or the high priests, and so these many people within the Jewish society, and so Jesus had much friction against these people, and Jesus did not fit these people. And so ultimately, although many Jews said that they had served God, but then God, with this Jesus, who was the Word that became flesh and the Word who came to this earth, they served God, and it was completely different. And so to the parable of the vineyard, not the parable of the vineyard, to the parable of the king who threw a wedding feast for his son, although we speak about this, there's nothing even more evil than having a heart that is different from the king's. That is the heart to be cursed. That is the heart that will be judged. During the time of Noah, the ark was made, and not entering into that ark, that was what was considered evil. So having a heart that is different from God, during the time of Noah, he built the ark. Having the heart that is different from God, and having the heart not to enter into the ark, and just as that is evil, even during this time, although we are speaking about the younger son right now, although he has a father, but he doesn't want to live through his father, this son, truly his father is wise. His father has abundance, and his father is overflowing with love. Even though his father has all things, and although his father is truly a great person, but not living with the will of his father, this younger son, he doesn't have the eyes to see his father. He could not see the father's wisdom, nor the father's prudence, or the power of the father, or the love of the father. Because he did not have the eyes to see the father, in the son's heart, it had departed from his father, and he had his plans, and then he had his own world. The king who threw a wedding feast for his son, although he invited many people, they could not see the king with their own eyes, and so they refused the invitation of the king. The feast was so beautiful, and it was so luxurious. It was a feast that could have made them so happy, but they did not look at it at all, and then they rather killed the people who invited them. And so this story is telling us about many, many different things. An owner built a vineyard, and then he loaned it to husbandmen and went to a faraway country. And even the story of this vineyard owner is exactly the same thing. And ultimately today, the problem of many people is that instead of living with the things of God, in other words, instead of wanting to live inside of the Father, they want to live in their own world, and they want to live inside of that. That is the most serious problem. And so today, as we discuss about this, let me write this up upon the board. Oh, the second son, we call him the prodigal son, right? So this younger son, because he does not live with the father's things, he departed from the father. And he wanted to go to the world that he wanted to go. So the second son left the father and went on his own way. His own world. His own path, his own world. And this is what the Bible is telling us is sin. Therefore, regarding us, the things that humans do that is considered most evil is us people not living with the things that come from God. Although Jesus had come to this earth, but us not wanting to live through Jesus Christ. In John chapter 6, Jesus said, although Jesus had prepared everything that he was going to do, but in the heart of Philip, rather than doing it with the things of Jesus, rather than doing it through Jesus' way, more than anything else, he tried to live through the calculation of men. And he tried to live that way. And so in our last lecture, the 16th lecture, when we lectured about the man who fell among thieves, the lawyer, although he was the one who had to live through Jesus, but this lawyer did not want to live through the things that Jesus had. So to make himself look right, and with the zeal that comes from himself, and through his effort that comes from himself, he tried to accomplish something to gain eternal life. And in front of God, although he tried to live a life of loyalty, he lived a life of turning against Jesus, and he had rejected Jesus. So today, me believing in myself, how evil that is in front of God, and how wrong that is, we actually have no idea. And that is why ultimately, although there are many people who are living in this world with the wisdom of God, and rather than living with the power of God, living through their own efforts, and that which is not of God, but from themselves, and if they're trying to find success within that, then we are exactly like the second son here today. And so that is why the second son came to his father and said, Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. So the younger son, although he has departed from his father, through the wisdom and the power inside of himself, if my father gives me my wealth, then I can take the father's wealth, and surely I can be successful. And even though I am apart from the father, I can do well. And that's how he boasted, and he had such confidence in himself. Father, I can do it. Son, if you depart from me, you cannot do anything. Father, no, I am all grown now. Don't look at me as a little child. No, really, I can do it. I am not the son that you think of. Father, don't worry about me. If you give me my portion of the goods that follow to me, then Father, really, I can show you something. And but then the father, he divided unto his son the living. Therefore he divided his portion of the goods and gave it to his son. Of course the father knew that his son would take his wealth and would only waste it, and although he knew this, but the father had to teach him the world where the son could not do anything after he had departed from his father. And only because he had to teach him this, the father was able to divide his living unto his son. Therefore his father was able to give his inheritance to his son. And so the son was excited, right? And so among the tremendous wealth of his father, the wealth that had fallen unto him, he decided to never return to the father again. But then, What happened to this son? When he departed from his father, he fell among the harlots that were there. And so with that tremendous wealth, that tremendous inheritance that his father gave him, and in the end result, he wasted all of it and ended up living his life riotously and lustfully. And he lived this kind of life. And so when the younger son thought about himself, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't live like this. I don't have that much money left. I better snap out of it. So through the effort and determination of the second son, there was no way that he could just snap out of it. This son thought, if I try, I could do whatever I want. Everyone, don't these words seem very funny to you? There is a story of a tortoise who raced a rabbit. And because the tortoise was racing a rabbit, and so this rabbit, very effortless, he would hop, 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 and he goes very quickly. But then the tortoise, he would move so slowly. And so then rabbit thought to himself, I could take a nap here. There's still so much time before the tortoise catches up. And so he had that pride that I can wake up at any time I want because I can move faster than the tortoise. Although he could run better than the tortoise, because he believed in himself, I can wake up at any time before the tortoise comes. He believed in himself. So this rabbit thought to himself, I can nap here, it'll be okay. It'll be a long time before the tortoise catches up to where I am. So he had this pride that he could run so much better than the tortoise. He thought to himself, I can wake up at any time I want to. And so he had this pride. And therefore he was defeated by the tortoise. Although it is true that the rabbit runs much faster than the tortoise, but because he truly believed in himself, if he didn't believe in himself, I should not sleep here. I cannot trust myself. If I fall asleep, then I'm not going to do anything. If he did not believe in himself, then ultimately he would have went to the finish line because he had that pride which said that he could go faster than a tortoise, and in the result it made him believe in himself. And there are many people, because they believe in themselves, even though they depart from God, they think they can be happy. Even though they depart from God, they think that they can have honor, they can have power, they can have wealth, and they can have pretty wives, and they can go to a good college. And if they have all of these things, these people, they're thinking that they can be happy with all of these things. Everyone, we people, we departed from God, and ultimately, no matter where we go or what we do, we cannot find any happiness. Happiness is only within the Father. But then us humans who are so proud, because we depart from God and we believe in ourselves, they think that they can do it. And so the second son, he thought that he could do something, but then in the end, what was the result? Ultimately, all the misery of men. The fact that he departed from his father and thinking that he could do well, he did not care about, he was ignorant of the power of his father. He was not caring for the power of the father. He didn't care for the love of his father. And so this younger son who was disinterested from the wisdom of his father, and because he lived this wasteful life, he completely lost his father's inheritance. And in the village where he lived, a famine arose. And so he had no food. And in the end result, even though he had found a job, it was to feed the swine husks. But this younger son, he never worked at his father's house. So even though he was just herding swine, he could not do that well either. So the person who was hiring him to work, he gave the pigs husks to eat, but he did not give the son anything to eat. And until now, as the precious son, this second son, who had lived through the things that his father had given him, when he departed from his father, there was nothing that he could do. He became a fool among fools, but he did not know that at all. And so now this younger son is hungry. And he had been hungry for many days. And so he was perishing with hunger. And when this younger son realized, here I perish with hunger, when he came to realize this, he received the heart to then return to his father. In other words, he began to think of his father. In that place where he could not even eat the husks of the swine that he fed and he was perishing with hunger, this place is just like the place in lecture 16 where the man who fell among thieves. The place where God's mercy comes down and the place that God gives His grace. That is the place. And as the man who fell among thieves was about half dead, this younger son who had lived a riotous life, as he had lost all of his wealth, and as a result, the heart of believing in himself hit complete rock bottom. And he discovered how wrong he was. And when he realized truly that he could do nothing, and truly everything that he did was completely wrong, that is when he could see his father. And what did the second son say? Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. And so from now on, Father, in your house, there are so many hired servants who have enough bread to eat and to spare. Father's house, even the hired servants have plenty of food. But here I am perishing with hunger. Father, you are a person who has power. You are a person who has wisdom. Father, I am perishing here with hunger. Father, I will return unto you. Father, I can no longer call you Father. Father, do not call me a son, but please make me as one of thy hired servants. I will work with your hired servants. I will sleep with your hired servants. And I will live among your hired servants. And even if I have to go to one side of the room and eat with them, I will not be ashamed of myself, but it is more than enough for me, Father. And so this heart that the younger son could never have on his own began to form inside of him. He believed in himself, and he exalted himself. And this second son who had lived only from the things of himself, that life of himself came to an end. And right then, he rose, and then he went to his father. Everyone, the greatest thing that men can do is exactly this, is to do exactly what this person did. I will arise, and then I will go to my father. This is the most beautiful thing that we humans can do. The greatest thing that a human can do, this is what it is, that is able to return to the Father. Who can return to the Father? Is it because you want to go back to your Father that you go back? No, that is not so. To realize how deceitful that world of believing yourself is. And to realize how wrong that world is. And to realize how twisted that life is. And how it is not right. We can do nothing. And when we realize that we are people who are truly powerless, at that time, we will be able to see that amazing world of the Father that we were not able to see until now. The wisdom of the Father, the love of the Father, and the grandness of the Father, and that abundance of the Father, and the richness of the Father. And so to this second son who is now able to see these things, and so this younger son's eyes were filled with so many tears that he couldn't even see in front of him. In this son's eyes, there were tears that still remained. And he is now returning to his father. But then for this younger son who is now returning to his father, who saw who first? Was it the father who saw the son first, or the son who saw the father first? The Bible said the father saw the younger son first. And it says that the father saw his younger son who was returning back to him first. Who ran faster? So the second son had so many things to say to his father, so the steps of the second son was very, very slow, but the steps of the father were so fast. These steps of the father who was running towards his son. Father, he had grabbed and fell upon his son's neck. And the father, he had kissed his younger son. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before thee. And Father, therefore I am no longer worthy to be called thy son. This is what he's supposed to say to his father. I know it all, son. You are my son. You are my son. You are my precious son. And so when the son finally met the father, he no longer had to say this anymore. Everyone, what is evil? Everyone, this amazing Father of ours, how much does He love us? We don't even know this truth. And even today, we do not live through the things of the Father. We have departed from the Father and we lived riotously, falling into all kinds of sin, and living with our own condemnation, and thinking of the Father as a person who is not going to love me. And because we do not know how great this love of the Father is for us, people are not returning to God. Everyone, man is miserable not because of the sins that he has committed, and the reason why we cannot live spiritual life is not because of our weaknesses. But today, He who loves us, He who forgives us, He who leads us, that love of God, we don't know how great that love is for us. And that is why we are living within misery. And that is why we are not able to live spiritual life well. And that is why we are unable to gain the things that God has prepared for us. And that amazing world we are not able to receive in our hearts. The Father prepared for the Son the best robes. And so the Father took the ring that has all the authority of the Father and put it on the hand of the younger son. And to his son who had no shoes and his feet were torn, the Father had prepared new shoes for him. And so the Father had killed the best and the fattest of the calves. And the Father, He was so happy. And so the Son, he saw how the Father was joyfully accepting him when he returned home. Through this joy of my Father, it is by that I will live now. If my Father rejoices, then that rejoicing is my joy. If my Father is happy, then that happiness is my happiness. And the Son now no longer lives with his own things. From that moment on, the world that this Son saw and the world that this Son knows has already been over. And when he returned to his Father's house, and now he lives with the things of his Father, the wisdom of the Father, the righteousness of the Father, and by the joy of the Father, and by the possessions of his Father, he is able to live. And in this amazing world, today, through this parable of Jesus, God is allowing all of us to receive this world. Why are we not confident in our spiritual lives? Why are we living in sadness? And why do we live with worries and concerns? Is it because we had made mistakes? Is it because our sins are great? Is it because we lack? Is it because we are lazy? That is not so. The love of God, it is because we do not know or understand just how great this amazing love, this love that God has given us. Today, by ourselves, within the thoughts that Satan has given to us, we are in pain and we are in difficulty, and then we are deceived by Satan and we try to figure ourselves out by thinking that we have to do well, and then we live being deceived like this. The younger son, when he lost his father's wealth, did he immediately return to his father? No, he didn't. Through his effort and through his own good works, and although he tried very hard, he realized that he cannot live through himself. Me living with the things of myself, that itself is death. That itself is a curse. And he came to know that that itself is evil in front of his Father. Everyone, today in Luke chapter 15, the meaning that he is teaching us today is so great. Everyone, why are we so sad right now? Why are we all in despair? Why do we hesitate? Is it because we are weak? Is it because we lack? It is not because we lack, and it is not because we make mistakes. Just because we do not know how amazing the amazing love of God is, that is why we fall into our weaknesses. We condemn ourselves. And we do not go again, and we do not return to go before God. And that is why the second son, he finally does go back to his father. And so having departed from his father, among all the things he did, this is the greatest sin. It is sin. The second son, and then what did he say to himself? The second son said, I will arise and then go to my father. And it says, I will go to my father. I will arise, I will go to my father. This is the most beautiful thing. And we can see that this is the most amazing world. This is the most beautiful thing that we could do. And truly the evil thing that we had committed was we departed from God. And if there was the most beautiful thing and the most righteous thing to do, it is to return to the Father. So what is in the Father? So this Father, what does this Father possess? So with the Father, there is righteousness. In the Father, there is hope. In the Father, there is holiness. In the Father, there is perfection. In the Father, there is love. The love of the Father, the wisdom of the Father, the virtue of the Father, The power of the Father. Yes, arise. I will arise and go to my Father. To all of you who are attending this lecture, today, we must arise, the place that we are dwelling in now, from where we're eating the husks of the swine, where we are just sitting back. And from that place we must arise, and we must go to the Father. Within the love of the Father, within the virtue, wisdom, and power, and to the righteousness of the Father, that is where we must go and enter in. And at that moment, then the happiness of the Father will become my happiness. And now the Son is happy. So what qualification does he have to be happy? The condition is his Father rejoices. And so his Father's joy became his joy. Our theology students who are listening to this cyber theology lecture, this Mahanaim Cyber Theology School, from any other theology school, is completely different. We are not just teaching knowledge, but this living Word of God becoming power. And as you receive classes, we are people who fall into ourselves. We are people who are looking to ourselves. And we are locked into our own world, but as we listen to the Word, we are removed from our world to the world of the Father. So, from the weaknesses that are inside of me, my foolishness, and dwelling with my ignorance, and then we are returned to the Father, and we gain that amazing world that the Father has prepared. Father has prepared for us the best robes. It is the wedding garments. So through this Jesus Christ, He has given us the best clothes of Christ. It is the best raiment. It is the garment of righteousness. And now the things of the Father, all of the things of the Father, are things that we can wear as our own. So clothes represent the position that the Father has. All the position of the Father has all been given unto us. It is an amazing world. But briefly, let us think about the elder son. The elder son, when his younger brother returned, he was very complainful about how the father was treating this younger son who returned. Father, for these many years I have served thee, neither transgressed I at any time. For you, Father, I have done this diligently. You have never givest me a kid that I may make merry with my friends. How could you kill the fatted calf for this son of yours who lived the righteous life? And so this older son was complaining. So the father was happy, but the older son was so complainful. So the father was happy, but the older son was completely angry. The father thinks that his younger son is lovable, but the older son is hating him. He has a different heart from the father, and that is what is evil. Although the younger son, once he had a heart that was different from his father, but now he has the same heart as his father. Everyone? We need to have the same heart as our Father. So what does the Father say? Yes. All of mine is yours. I have given you everything. But the son says he had never received anything. The father said that he had given all of his things to the older son. But the older son said, you have never even killed a little goat for me. Then whose words are right? Everyone, this elder son, although he's still living within his father's house, but in the world of his thoughts he had departed from his father, because he had a different heart from his father. But then he says that he has lived never receiving anything from his father. But the second son, to him the father had given him everything. The father had given him the ring and gave him the identity of his son. And so now the second son can enjoy all the things of his father, and that is the world that the younger son now lives in. So the second son, he had returned to the world of his father. This amazing world of him living by the wisdom of his father. And today, even to you who are listening to this lecture, let us not live through our own things, but then to be able to live through the things of the Father. When we are able to live inside of that world, then we will be able to experience an amazing world. Therefore now, let us depart from our hearts, and let us return to the Father, and let us live with the things of the Father. And therefore in the Bible, if we look at Ephesians chapter 1, if we look at the words that are written here in Ephesians chapter 1, in chapter 1 verse 18, eyes of your understanding being enlightened, that ye may know what is the hope of His calling, and what the riches of His glory of His inheritance in the saints, and what is the exceeding greatness of His power to usward who believe according to the working of His mighty power. It says. So everyone, this will be the end of today's lecture, but I will meet you once again next time. This will be it for today's lecture.